Right, today I'm going to be changing the impeller in this Yamaha. This is a 4 horsepower engine. It's a 2-stroke, and it's on its 2 years. Now I change my impellers every 2 years. Obviously I keep an eye on them, and I can see when the water flow starts to slow a bit. Now that's normally, it's not normally due because the impeller's busted or anything like that. It's to do with salt building up in the impeller chamber. So when you go in there, because you're going to take this bottom leg off here, you just as well change out the impeller, and you'll find the impeller will have bent into the shape of the way it spins, and it will have stayed in that shape. You can take them out. You can actually leave them, and they will almost reshape themselves if you leave that out for so many months. But anyway, we're going to just change out for another one. So we get this ready running for the season. The only other thing I've got to do is put a new spark plug in it. Everything else, I gave it a full service last year, and this year it'll have a sort of basic service. The one behind it went into a mechanics and had everything done. So for this year, I normally service it every year, then it, like I say, it goes in now and again. So what's going to happen is to remove this, because this is where your impeller is, in here. Well, it's actually up here, but we need to take this off. So for this engine, it's going to be one nut here, which is a 10mm, and there's a nut behind the one that holds the I can't remember the name of it, anode on here. So it's the one behind that. So you remove that one and that one. Then you have to come up here, and there's a little rubber bung here which we will pull off. Inside you will see a knot. You'll have to set your gear lever to where it's central. Mine, it's in reverse, it'll be central. So you undo that, and that detaches the gear, basically, putting it in and out of gear. So it's basically 2 nuts on this engine, and then that will drop off. And when we've taken that off, we'll come back and have a look at it. Right, so what I do is I just mount it on a bench and use a clamp like this. You might want to secure it a bit better, it's entirely up to you. I've got faith in this, so I do it this way. So now the leg's off, your impeller is under here. So what you need to do is you get, on this particular engine, it's, I believe it's 10mm, yeah, it's 10mm. So you basically undo all these. Now they will be a bit stiff because obviously being in salt water. Now I tend to change my impellers in the engines every 2 years. They say you should change them every year. Well, manufacturers and people who sell parts will tell you that. Now, I think you've really got to base it. If you want to be safe, change it every year, if you want to be certain. If you keep an eye on it, that you're good for 2 years. I mean, I've had impellers in for a lot longer than that. I shouldn't have, but I did. So with me, like I say, I keep an eye on it, and I know 2 years the impellers are absolutely fine. I've never had a problem. This one, I think the last time I did this one was probably 3 years, but 1 year the engine was sitting on the boat as a reserve and I wasn't really using it. Now I've been using it this year a lot. I decided it's time to have a look. Plus I can see when the water's coming out, if the water starts to slow a little bit. Sometimes it's just a case of a bit of corrosion in the engine, or a bit of dirt. You just need to push out the piece of wire where the water comes out. But once you see the water slowing a bit, you know it's this. And what basically happens is crystals, salt crystals, build up in the impeller, and that's what you're really trying to do, is get in there and clean out and check the impeller. I mean, the impellers they last, basically. They don't just break unless it's a really nasty one you've got from somewhere. I should really get some air compressed tools and do this with the air compressor, make my life so much easier, but we'll get there. So now they're almost undone. There we go. Okay. So what I do is I just take those off, put them into a tray or somewhere safe. And then you pull this off carefully. So that's the cover off. You'll see there's a gasket in there that can be replaced. And then this is the bit, there's a pin that goes through here which is on the impeller, which stops it obviously from spinning, or makes it lock so it doesn't just free spin. Just be very careful because these pins come out. If you drop that pin, you might have a hell of a job finding it. So what I tend to do is I'll just remove it for now. Well, you have to remove it. Well, no, on this one, yeah, you do have to remove it. Take it out and put it somewhere safe. Just be careful because sometimes you pull this off, forget, move this around, and the next thing you've dropped it and you don't know where it's gone. I don't know if you can see that, but you can see the way that it is bent to shape. Now you can leave these out over winter if they're in good nick, and I believe they will come back to shape. You can probably do it in warm water maybe. But like I say, you can just replace this. Well, it depends obviously on you know, if you can afford to keep replacing these parts, and if they're damaged. I mean, normally if you look closely in the joins, if it's damaged, you'll see cracking starting to appear on the bottom of the fins. But usually it's the case that they go out of shape, they don't work so well. But we've got another one we're going to be putting in there. So now this is the bit here. If you take this plate off, you'll see here, you'll see all the build-up of salt in here. Now this engine was sitting in the car for a few weeks after I stopped fishing. I didn't flush it straight away, which is something I should have done, but I thought I might get out again. I wasn't 100% sure if I was going to fish again, so I left it. And obviously you get this. Now you may think that, oh yeah, when you get the engine going this will flush out. It doesn't actually. This salt quite often will just stay in here, and sometimes you can build it up to a point where literally that is full of salt. This is a little bit, which isn't good, but it's not terribly bad. So all you do with that is, easiest way is just get yourself a little screwdriver or something like that and carefully just remove it if you've got any corrosion or something like that, and just literally take it out. And you can see there, I don't know if you can see that, I'll have to, you see there that is just salt. And that's basically what stops your water flowing properly in your impeller when it's not working properly. It's not normally a case that the impeller's knackered or anything like that. It's normally just build up of salt, dirt, corrosion, that kind of thing. And like I say, if you've got the time and that each winter or whatever to do this, you can do this every winter, just clean it out. Like I say, what I tend to do is I will do this every 2 years, pull it apart, service it all like this, and I will flush it normally every year. But then, like I say, again, it depends on how often you're using your engine, how often you leave it standing with salt water in it. If you're using it constantly, it's not too bad. I mean, that's what I do, as I use it all the time, so it's not too bad. Right, so I'm just going to clean all of this out. I'll do it with this and a little brush and water and that, and we'll cut edit to the next part. Right, now you can plate back on. Make sure you put it on the right way. Now what I've done is I've put a tiny little bit of grease just around the drive shaft, but don't get it around in your water system area if you can help it. So that goes on, and then you've got to put that pin back in for the impeller, which is here, so that just tucks in like that. Then you put the impeller, slide that down, now you are going to have to make sure that it goes down over that pin. Make sure you've got no dirt like that. That won't help. Then let me just do that. Just making sure it's nice and clean, the bottom of this cylinder. Okay. And then I can remember which way it goes on. And you put this, now when you put the impeller on, the best way is just tuck it onto there, and you can, I'm going to have to actually move this a little bit, you can push down, and if you put your prop in gear as such, or just wind it, holding onto that and winding it, it'll drop on nice and easy like that. And that is how you put it on. Then it's just a case of putting all your bolts back. What I tend to do with the, almost forgot there, what I tend to do is with the bolts I just put a tiny drop of grease just on the bolt. Not too much, just a little bit. It's just to help release the bolts when you come to service it again. Same with this one, a little bit of grease on there. So you don't have to go mad, just a tiny bit. And these bolts won't tend to work, they're way loose having grease on. They'll get tight anyway, so they'll be fine. Okay, I'm just going to put that back again. Right, I'm just going to tighten those bolts down. Right, so now we've stopped and done, we are going to put it back on the engine. So what you do is, again, make sure everything's clean and nothing, no dirt, nothing like that. This is going to go up inside here. Now, when you go through here, you've got to make sure that you get this rod in between that nut, the one we had to undo. This can be a little bit fiddly, but there we go. And just best to try and hold that so you don't push it up. Right. The next trick is to locate some engines are easier than others. Sometimes if you change the angle, it can help just to get it to sit in. There we go. So sometimes it's just a case of fiddling a little bit to get it in. Doesn't always line up. And if you can pull the cord very carefully, don't try and start it, just pull that cord just a tiny bit just to move the drive so it'll line up, or you can sometimes do it with the prop. But anyway, she's in now, so all we've got to do now is stick the two bolts back on and then reattach the shaft there, or the gear lever. And finally, we just need to tighten this up in here. Now I know on this engine it's basically drops to the bottom of the, there's two bars in there and drops to the bottom, or pretty much in reverse. For this one it's centre, almost centre of that hole. So. But you'll figure it out, and if it's not quite right, just tighten it, undo it, and see that it goes into gear. So now it should. He says should. Now you see it's not going in gear. Just check that everything's right. So it must be slightly off. Try that. No, wait a minute. This is not right. That rod needs to go down to the bottom. There we go. Now we've got it. Now it should be good. Tighten it up. Now it will go in gear. There you go. Just needed that rod to be fully down. It wasn't quite down. Just make sure that that's tight, because you don't want to lose your gears out there. There we go. Right, and then all I got to do is put that bung back on. Looks like corrosion, but it's actually the primer stayed on, but the black I just sprayed on that, because there was a little bit of corrosion starting. So what I do is I just grease this up a little bit before I pop it back in there, and that way it stops any corrosion from forming. There we go. Just spin it, and it will just make sure that it opens up and sits properly if you can. There you go. That's that. Should be all ready now for the season. Well, almost ready. I'm going to change the spark plug in it, as the one I've got in there. I don't know. It didn't seem to want to work too well starting, and I'm certain it's the spark plugs. I did use it quite heavily this year, and that is one thing I will change every year, is the spark plug, because that is definitely something that is needed.